Hey YouTube, Racer4 back with a review on the Bachmann Midland 4F. Now, like I said in the Model Railroad update, this is number 43924 BR Black Lake Crest. Now this one does have the Fowler tender. Bachmann made 3 versions of this model. One in BR Black Early Crest with the Johnson Dealey tender, although most places will describe it as just a Dealey tender, and then they also made an LMS version also with the Dealey tender, but those are just the mass-produced versions. There was also a Collectors Club exclusive version with the same tender as the Early Crest and LMS versions that was in Somerset and Dorset Railway lined blue. Now, wish I could have gotten that one, but I'm not a Collectors Club member, and that one apparently sold out very quickly. I saw the description of that model up there for something like a day, and then the next time I went back and looked, it was gone. But anyway, again, this is 43924 as preserved. BR Black Lake Crest, item number 31882. It is 21-pin DCC ready right out of the box, but I have already fitted it with the 36557 decoder I mentioned in the Model Railroad update. Now this is not to be confused with the later LMS Class 4F 060s. While they were the same design, the LMS versions had some slight differences, mainly in cab and where they were built. Otherwise, they were pretty much identical. The first 10 LMS 4Fs, however, which were the ones built later by the LMS, not the ones built earlier by the Midland Railway, were built with spare, second-hand Johnson tenders from, earlier engines that I'm assuming had been retired and scrapped, but the tenders retained. But the differences in the cab is where the Midland Railway version was a right-hand drive, meaning you drove it from the right-hand side of the cab, the side that's facing you right now. Whereas on the LMS version, you drove from the left side of the cab, which is the side in the back of the box. Now, fairly standard Bachmann packaging. Now the reason I went with this one is it's preserved on the same heritage railway as my Bachmann 57XX, or at least the real-life version. The only difference being the 5775 in real life is currently in BR Lake Crest green instead of GWR green, but personally I like the look of the GWR green better. But this is also the only preserved Midland 4F, whereas there are 3 preserved LMS versions, 3 preserved LMS 4Fs. The 3 LMS versions of which are, if I remember correctly from my research into this class of locomotive, the 4Fs in general, the Midland and the LMS versions, all 3 of the preserved LMS version are currently down for overhaul for their boiler, because their boiler tickets all expired or they were in need of overhaul. Now this one came with a bag of spare detail bits that I could apply myself. There weren't very many in there, but they were enough to make it. They were the ones needed to really make the locomotive look realistic and look right. And I'll get to those in a minute, but this one was also the first engine to leave the Barry Scrapyard in Wales. Yes, that is the famous Woodham Brothers Barry Scrapyard in Wales. This was the 43924 was the first engine to be saved from there. So that's special. But anyway, again, standard nowadays Bachmann ice block packaging, flips up from one end. Perfect for storage of the model in, and say a move. Now the added detail bits that I've applied are the coal rail here, this little arch thing just behind the center of the tender, the fire irons and long-handled shovels, the cab doors here, and the front coupling hook, complete with movable coupling chain, which, while the instructions for the model may say it's merely cosmetic, I have found it does come in handy when pulling a train in reverse if you do not have the front coupler fitted like I do. Now that was a choice I made to make it look more realistic. Now, since it's as preserved for the head code, I decided to go with a head code it commonly carries in preservation today, which is what back in 1962, which is quite appropriate for this locomotive being its late crest, is signal for an ordinary train, but it's also what the locomotive carries in preservation nowadays whenever it's in pulling a train on the Keithley and North Valley Railway. But anyway, not a whole lot of detailing on the front buffer beam as far as lettering or whatnot. Midland region was not one to put the class and the shed allocation of that locomotive on the buffer beam like, say, the eastern region or northeastern region were. Because if you look at, Flying Scotsman right now, it's got A3 on one side of the buffer beam, then it's, LNER number, which is 4472, but also in a combination of its LNER look and its BR look, it also has, if you look, York down along the bottom side of the buffer beam on the front of the locomotive on the driver's side. But again, like I said, this locomotive is currently even still a right-hand drive locomotive, as are the other two, technically three, Midland 4Fs. In my opinion, that's one of the most well-detailed steam locomotive cabs I've seen from Bachmann to date. Now, in who knows how long, Bachmann will be releasing their 1F 060 tank engines, either with the back half of the cab or without the back half of the cab, so we'll just wait and see how well detailed those are. But sprung buffers, as typical with most Bachmann engines nowadays, that goes for the tender as well. Little Golden M coupling pockets front and rear. I currently have this fitted with the KD number 19 couplings, knuckle coupling. On the rear, nothing on the front except the coupling chain. Now, if I turn the locomotive onto its side, get the camera angled up, you can see on the underside of the tender there is the brake rigging, tender pickups, plug for the PC board in the tender, because that's where the decoder goes in this model. And one unique thing about this model is it's got an adjustable length drawbar. Basically you can loosen up a screw just in front of the forward axle of the tender and basically adjust the drawbar to whatever coupling distance you want. Now, I've got it coupled closer, personally, but some may want it coupled farther apart for tighter radius curves. But I've found that where I have it coupled, it works perfectly fine on an American 22-inch radius curve. Now, there is also the brake rigging on the underside of the locomotive. Brake rigging on the locomotive and tender was factory fitted. But again, the coal rails, any other stuff in the coal bunker, plus the coupling hook on the front and the cab doors in the middle, I've had to fit myself. Now, for other detail on this locomotive, you've got a brass painted whistle and safety valve. Now, this is Mock Racer 4 signing off. Now, sorry I I kind of cut off quickly at the end there. My DS has a time limit of usually about 10 minutes for filming a video, so I just wanted to take and add a few extra things that I forgot to mention in the first about 10 minutes of the video, or the first part of the video, whichever I decide to do. I may make it part of the first video, may make it a completely different part. But anyway, some things I forgot to mention. For detailing, you've also, along the locomotive, you've got the metal handrails. Along the sides of the boiler, you've got the reversing gear here. Down here in the center of the metal running plate. Yes, you heard me correctly, it is a metal running plate. As per Bachmann's original prototype, unpainted prototype photos that they posted on bachmannbranchline.co.uk back after they got the samples put together after they had announced the locomotive. But one thing they didn't mention is, sorry you can't see it because of the light, I'm working in a dark room right now and there's not exactly any lights right above me, but there is down here in the center of the running plate detail for the valve gear that has been molded on, as mentioned by other YouTubers who have reviewed this engine, albeit the early Crest version or the LMS version. Now you've got this bit of piping right here just behind the smoke box, which I'm assuming is for the ejector for the brakes. Now this would have been vacuum braked, but in real life these locomotives, like most, were not excused from receiving a nickname from engine crews. Now you've got your A3 Super Pacifics, your A4 Streaks, your Stanier Jubilees, Black Fives, Coronations, and then you've got your War Department, or Dub-D as they're more referred to, Class 280s, your 9Fs, your A1 Terriers. Now these ones actually had 3 nicknames, and YouTube user Chris Edengreen mentioned these 3 in his video about the 4Fs from his Steam Locomotives in Profile series on YouTube, and the 4F was his most recent video. And in that video he said that these engines had acquired the names the +4s for an unknown reason, clankers because of a clanking sound made by the valve gear, and big goods, which big goods being their more common nickname, which was used on most of the Midland network for these engines, because these were designed as the largest, to be the most powerful goods engines on the Midland Railway. Now, there were of course larger freight engines like the 7F 080s, also mentioned by Chris Edengreen, that could haul heavier trains, but a lot of the Midland crews loved these engines versus the the London Northwestern crews, who apparently did not like these engines, preferring their larger 080s. Now the 4Fs share the same frame. The real-life 4Fs share the same frame and drive wheels as the 3F 060 designed by Johnson. The main difference being the boiler, because on the 3F 060 tender engines, not the Chinty's tender engines, the boiler was not superheated, whereas on the 4F it is. Now, a few of the 4Fs were built by, for the Midland Railway by, Armstrong, who built a few for the Midland, but also built about, I think it was like 5 or 10 for the Somerset and Dorset. That's why Bachmann made one of these with in the early crest and LMS BR early crest and LMS versions, or at least using that tender in the Somerset and Dorset Railway Blue. But anyway, figured I'd add in a bit of that extra bit of information. But anyway, yeah, that's about all I really wanted to take an ad that I didn't really have time to in the previous video. So once again, Mach Racer 4 signing off. Now I may or may not review the coal wagons, but I'll most likely do the American box cars I got and the two American coaches I got. So again, Mach Racer 4 signing off.